Who's the mustache with the broken nose? It's Kinsey, narcotics. He's one of the guys that got into it with at the Iceberg Lounge. What are you saying, Kinsey moonlights for the Penguin? Alright, moonlights as a cop.
Do you expect me to talk?
Good evening and welcome to episode 222 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm Becca and as always joined by my fellow Bat co-hosts Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Good evening, folks.
Batastic.
Don't see the relevance of that to the Bourne identity.
No. So yeah, just to apologise, we have been off air for a little bit. Life and work and Becca having a cold has got in the way, but we are back briefly. We decided to jettison our review series of X-Men because it just all fell to
We
pot.
will explain that in a minute.
We'll go through it, no worries.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically just in a nutshell, before diving into Bourne, a new Batman film has come out, so we thought we'd review that just a little bit. But yeah, so we'll wrap up everything with the X-Men, and then we'll review the new Batman film.
All right.
And then next time we shall dive headlong into the Bourne Identity series.
We watched Dark Phoenix because we did most of the X-Men and
We did.
not Dark Phoenix. Sorry, New Mutants. New Mutants was one of those that we were like, do we do it? Do we not? Because it's kind of a spin-off. It's not really part of the main series, but we decided we were going to do it. So I've got hold of a copy, and I almost wouldn't know what to say about it because we've covered worse films. But this barely qualified as a film. I don't know.
Was it even an X-Men movie? I'm not quite sure.
Sort of. But the point is that I don't know who, because presumably any film, even if it's an ongoing series, even in that you would have to pitch it. Surely, you'd have to go in and say, right, this is what we want to do next, and here are the main beats.
It did have lots of production errors and issues,
there was no
and obviously COVID got in the way. And
there was just no story, and I was watching it horrified because I thought, well, I wouldn't know what to say about this. There's just nothing happening. And then, so we were still going to do it. And then we got delayed. My computer blew up, so I'm recording on like a borrowed one at the moment. And I'm sat there thinking, well, we'll still do it. And then like a couple of weeks go by, and I'm thinking, right, we're getting into the territory of me having to watch this again. And I really, really don't want to. And then we had a chat, the three of us, when we did the Christmas stuff. That's how long it's been. We haven't recorded in 3 months.
long time.
And I'm thinking, like, and with everyone, I think all of us said it almost at the same time. Let's just not bother. So
It got a bit much, didn't it? We were like, we can't go through this again.
No, we did the X-Men series as far as I'm concerned. The only thing that's like inconsistent, if you listen to the whole shows, is we promised New Mutants and we're not doing it. But when we started X-Men at the start, we were going to do 10 films and we did 10 films. So
to be fair, that was largely my choice. Like it was something that, like on the list of films that we reviewed, it was something that I wanted to do, that Chris has wanted to do, that Dave's wanted to do, and this was kind of one of mine. So I kind of feel like we have done the bulk of the series.
Yeah.
We've been fair to it and we've reviewed it.
Yeah.
So I can tick that box.
But anyone listening who was waiting to see what we thought of New Mutants, because I think with most things that we ever cover, you've seen it or you're not going to see it. I think New Mutants might just be one of those that, like, you've seen the X-Men series, it bombed at the box office anyway, and you might be, let's see what they say about it. You know, if they really, really say, well, actually, this is surprisingly interesting, don't bother. There's no film there really. I don't know why they made it, and it had the feel not of like a train wreck. It had the feel of something where there was so much sunk cost that they just had to put it out anyway. But I don't know what about the script, the casting, the plot, the story, or anything excited anyone because it's barely a film.
It's very much like a teenage sort of Breakfast Club type thing, isn't it?
It's not coming of age type movie.
Yeah, it's probably more like a.
But that's being kind to it.
Yeah, that is being kind to it.
But I think that's what the vibe was, and I think because of its, it was going to be three movies that ran along with the other X-Men films, or would have built up to something more. I don't know what ultimately they had in mind, but I get the feeling that production issues, studio didn't know what to do with it. The thing happened with Marvel, and it was just like, all right, well,
and they kind of dumped it out in kind of a quiet slot. What I will say is, it doesn't look like you go and watch the Joss Whedon Justice League, and you can see the reshoots, and because all Marvel films, for example, have reshoots built into their schedule. But that would look normal. You finish, you watch an assembly cut, you go, right, we've got another 6 weeks and we'll do this. Justice League, for example, they clearly were retooling it later because Ben Affleck didn't look in the same shape. And obviously we know the whole story of Henry Cavill's moustache and stuff like that. This didn't look like this. This looked like it was all shot at the same time. It didn't look like it had been through some kind of horrific production. It just looked very undercooked.
Yeah, just unfinished, or just like
undeveloped. Probably is a better word.
Needed more beefing out.
They did it all fleshing out a bit more work done on it, I think.
They tried to play on this love story.
But I guess if it was like, let's just take all the superhero elements out of it, and you presented this as like an independent small film about a group of kids, it will probably fare better. But because it's got it's in the X-Men and we need to do X-Men stuff, it kind of fails to sort of live up to anything more than that.
Absolutely.
So
I wouldn't know where to rank it. I wouldn't know. It doesn't feel like an X-Men film. It kind of does.
It's a bit of an outsider, isn't it? Almost.
It does feel a bit like a young adult film. It's probably got more in common with the Hunger Games or something than it does anything else. But even then, it's got none of the scale. It's a very, very small film.
No, when I was sort of doing the reading around, and obviously the like for preparing for fun facts, for example, and a lot of reading interviews with like director and producer and everything as well. I think they took a lot of their. So you mentioned like Breakfast Club, like a lot of their the influence did come from the kind of very much Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, that sort of thing. But because it pulls also from that universe and also from the X-Men universe, and like superheroes and everything, I think perhaps it just kind of got lost. It tried to take influences from so many things. Like there's like horror movies, there's Buffy, sort of like teen comedy drama. It tried to take influences from so many places. It kind of lost its own identity as well, which is a great shame.
And the
they had a great
characters
cast
are just
though.
nothing.
Like the leads were all fantastic. Cast is brilliant.
They weren't given
this
a lot
like
to work
a bit
with.
of a labour of love, as it were. But it just got a bit messy, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the end of the X-Men series. We still want to do Bourne. I've had computer problems. Becca's had health problems. Chris has had work problems. And
I've had bloody cold.
plans.
Not very nice at all. Luckily
So,
not COVID.
yeah,
but
lots of reasons. We're not going to make any promises about our schedule, but obviously, from history, what we do is we record every week for a very, very long period of time, and then you get these little hiatuses. This was quite a long one. We can't promise it's going to be over because Chris is actually getting married in a week or two, so we don't.
Congratulations to you, Chris. Thank you.
But it ain't going to be 3 months again. Anyway, what are we?
It's now springtime. Oh my gosh.
Becca, what are we covering tonight?
Tonight, Bat fans. Yes, we are reviewing The Batman, starring Robert Pattinson, or Pattinson, our Bats, as he's come to be known. Zoe Kravitz, Jeffrey Wright, Paul Dano, Colin Farrell, who disappears into his role. John Turturro, Andy Serkis, Peter Sarsgaard, and many more. A score by Michael Giacchino, script by Matt Reeves and Peter Craig, directed by Matt Reeves, and released this year, 2022, at long last.
Yeah, it was meant to be out a couple of years ago. They got a part way through filming, and then COVID hit, and Pattinson immediately got it as well.
Yeah, he is very poorly with it, but
yeah, apparently so. He, back when our bodies didn't know what this thing was, that's when he got it.
Yeah, before the jabs.
Yeah. So it finally arrives. It's gone through a few dates, but a lot of this, I don't think it was finished that long ago. but there are large gaps in filmings, and to their credit, you can't tell what was
No,
filmed
I
when.
was really amazed by it. It was incredible. But where was it? Was it filmed? They filmed in like Liverpool or somewhere, I think.
Well, the bits I mean, maybe I should mention it at the time, but I won't. I'll do it now. The bits I recognised and then went to look up is when he goes to the memorial service for the slain mayor, and he goes into the town hall, which has all those pillars. I'm thinking, my goodness, that looks like St. George's Hall, but nothing next to it and in the background does. But I thought, well, that's easily changed digitally, and I looked at it, and yes, St. George's Hall is in it.
Okay, yeah, so my geography
That's if you want to look it up, folks. St. George's Hall it's opposite the Empire Theatre in Liverpool. It's a really grand old building. I think we've seen it in one of our films before, because I think the press conference in Creed was held there. The Walker building, I'm told, is in it, but I didn't pick that up. Definitely, though, and I did not pick this up at all, when he jumps off the building and deploys like his sort of gliding equipment, he's jumped off the Liver building.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I couldn't tell.
Wow, I didn't know that. Oh my
No,
gosh.
the Liver building is the most iconic building in Liverpool. Certainly, I think that would still be true. Whether that's still true in 100 years, who knows? But the Liver building.
That's quite iconic. If you do take that ferry across the Mersey, that's one of the big buildings that you know about.
Spelt like liver. Yeah, look up the Liver building. He dives off that.
Wow.
Some of the graveyard stuff when he's riding his bike with Zoe Kravitz, I think that was filmed in Glasgow. What else did I recognise? I definitely recognise some of the Chicago buildings, like the Wayne Tower from the Nolan trilogy is in this film. But the overall effect, it leaves you with something akin to New York, but not like it, in that it's an island, a bit like Manhattan. It's separated from other areas by a series of bridges. You've got something a little bit like Times Square. You've got the Gotham Empire, which is definitely the Empire State Building. You've got Gotham Square Garden, although I do believe there is a Gotham Square Garden in Chicago, and someone might tell me I'm wrong on that. Maybe I've fallen for like a little joke or something, but that definitely looks like Madison Square Garden, which I've been
I think,
to.
yeah, it's meant to be Madison Square Garden, isn't it?
So it's kind of and it's got bits that people think are in New York, but when you go there aren't, like the sort of overhead tube, train lines and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of a version of New York influenced by Chicago, but with also a little bit of sort of, dare I say, British dourness in it, in that if you're not from this country, it rains quite a lot and it's frequently overcast, and it's got kind of a sour feel as a result sometimes, and this film has that.
Yeah, I kind of, I mean, Seven's been mentioned a lot in regards to it, hasn't it?
Seven and Zodiac, really.
But well, yes, I'll agree. There's a little bit of like very 90s elements of Sevens in there, but the thing I picked up most on was it feels very much like the aesthetic of The Crow. Is probably what I kind of picked up most from, like the feel and the atmosphere of it. It felt very much like Gotham is like
it's funny you say that, because I thought The Crow was in turn influenced by the Tim Burton film.
Probably.
And The Crow does feel a lot more sort of set bound, but I see what you're saying. I can't disagree with anyone that says it's influenced by Seven and Zodiac, because in all its beats it is. But I feel a little bit like I do about The Dark Knight when people go, oh, he's made a Michael Mann film here, it's like Heat. And I'm going, well, you're not wrong, but at the same time, I sort of don't see it. Or at least if I do see it, I'm not feeling it. Let's put it that way. I don't disagree with you, but I'm not watching this film thinking of Seven.
It's more than just, oh, like, this is just like Seven. It's just like, they're just shades of it. It's like, it rains a lot and there's like a guy going around killing people in kind of gruesome.
Treating it as a bit of a game, and yeah, I understand all that. Just as there are certain things in the Nolan trilogy that are a little bit Michael Mann, but I don't watch those films thinking of Michael Mann, and I didn't watch this film thinking of Fincher. I think one of the things is just quickly to get into my background with Batman, and I'm not going to go into it because obviously this now goes with our Batman series. So everything I've said on Batman, I said there.
We've leapfrogged over the DC.
Yeah, just taking a massive leapfrog.
We will still do
Ignore Joker because we don't really know what the fuck that is.
Now, again, that's another rank outsider, isn't it? That's just, that could be a series all of its own.
Well, with the multiverse, it gets a bit easier. But what we will do, I think, is we will still do the DCEU, but we'll just treat solo Batman films as outside it. It's as simple as that. If Batman's in a team up, it's DCEU. And that's all we can do as a bit of a cheat. We wanted to cover this. We haven't done DCEU yet. We have done Batman, so it will go with that. I think the point I'm making, though, is I've said everything about my background on Batman. It's probably 3 or 4 years ago now, so I can barely remember what I said. But I won't say it all again. But the one thing I will say is I was always very fond of The Long Halloween. Now, The Long Halloween is available as like a 2-part animated film. But I would recommend the actual written version of it. And it's a detective novel. It's Batman in Year 2, which this is as well. It's sort of set in the same continuity as Frank Miller's Batman Year 1. And it's Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale who does all the drawings and stuff in it. And it's murders. It starts on Halloween, as this film does. Batman is drawn he's a bit stubbly, not massively, but this tends to be stubble on his face. It's not that clean. Something like Hush is drawn a lot cleaner and more heroically. This is a little bit untidy, but in a good way. Gotham is frequently raining. And every major holiday, murders are happening. A notable figure will turn up dead and Batman's trying to solve it. And it's got a lot of that in it. And the funny thing with The Long Halloween, I said this in a written review, the first words of The Long Halloween are, I believe in Gotham City. And someone is saying that to Falcone, who is wearing a tux, a bit like Don Vito in The Godfather. And he's in his den, just like the start of The Godfather. And the first line of The Godfather is, I believe in Gotham City. I believe in America, sorry. I believe in Gotham City was the first words of that. I believe in Gotham is in this film. Falcone is in this film. He's got the scratches on his face, which are there. Well, it's only at the moment of his death, but that was there in the comic book. He had a bit of a waster son, which was based a little bit, I think, on Fredo from the Godfather films. Other influences I just want to quickly point to is I did read a book called Batman Earth 1 about 10 years ago, probably. I'm assuming it was written by then. I think it was about 10 years ago. And it was a way they were doing this sort of Earth 1 version of characters to try and let new readers in. Let go of the baggage. We'll tell you a new version of these characters. It will be vaguely similar, but you don't have to be beholden to decisions we've made before. And in that version, Alfred was like an ex-soldier, a little bit tougher looking than Andy Serkis, but he walked with a stick. Andy Serkis walked with a stick. It's not quite consistent, but in the first scene of the film, Andy Serkis has got some scarring around his eyes. So has this guy. This guy trained Bruce Wayne, or at least did some of his training. Andy Serkis makes reference to doing the same. When he's cracking the code, he said it's reminding me of my days in, and he says something else, but it's a euphemism for when he was in the service. So he was some kind of
circus, I think he said.
He says circus, but I think it's like you don't learn code breaking in the circus, do you? So it's clearly a reference to some kind of military background. So it's taken those bits from Earth 1. I think what I'm saying is that this pointed to all the things in Batman I liked, and so I'm not thinking of Fincher because I'm thinking of The Long Halloween and I'm thinking of The Godfather. The last thing I'll say, I'm not going to get into my experiences with it or first thoughts yet, but the last thing I just want to say on what I noticed is there's a bit in the film where Bruce Wayne goes to see Falcone at his like penthouse or whatever it is, and Falcone's there playing pool. And there's a song playing in the background, like he's obviously got it on like a record player or whatever equivalent he has. I say record player because he strikes me as a bit of an old-fashioned guy there with a pool table. And I'm thinking, what is that? I recognise it. And it only took me about 5 seconds. I was like, that's Johnny Fontaine. That's I Have But One Heart, which he sang at the wedding in The Godfather. He sang at Connie's wedding, I Have But One Heart. So those are the two major influences I was thinking of when I was watching this film. Don't know about you guys.
Becca?
Definitely. No, yeah, that was quite interesting actually. You reeled off all those sort of facts about like how it kind of mirrors like The Godfather and these kind of films. I never really noticed that, to be honest, because obviously that's another big film re-release currently doing the rounds for anniversary. And yeah, I mean, you guys have seen it twice. I've only seen it once, but I'll definitely need to go back and Batman movie. Even we've seen Godfather multiple times. But yeah, and you guys have seen it twice, and I need to go back and obviously clearly watch it again because I totally missed that reference. I was just like, oh my god, well, yeah, I didn't realise that at all. So I'm just a bit blown away by that. It's
fact. The Godfather reference. The Godfather is kind of, there's a bit of a pastiche of that world in The Long Halloween, and this is playing on the Long Halloween's version.
I've not read, unfortunately,
but it recognises that The Long Halloween has taken it from The Godfather and done a few direct references.
Of course. Yeah, so that's another.
And the last thing on The Godfather, I can't promise I won't mention it again as we go through the film, but the last thing overt is Colin Farrell referenced Fredo as an influence on the way he played the Penguin.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that was him. He literally vanishes into that role. It was incredible. He like disappears under a mound of makeup, and then at the end it says, "Oh, Colin Farrell." I was like, "What?"
Yeah, apparently Matt Reeves sent him to, I don't know if it was Starbucks or Subway or something like that. He set him in full makeup, and no one picked up.
Nobody knew it was him. No, I'm not surprised.
Well, I'm not surprised they didn't know it was him, but they didn't know it was makeup either.
No.
So under normal everyday lighting, you can't tell.
Well, because he looks so like
it's so different.
Well, he has like quite severe sort of scarred or grotesque look. I don't think people.
Yeah,
would
he's
probably,
a grotesque character, isn't he?
I can imagine like if someone walked into somewhere, you kind of especially like in the Starbucks, you kind of wouldn't want to sort of like stare at him too much.
No, I think I might get a bit offended.
Last thing on sort of influences from things. Now there'll be bigger Batman fans than me that have picked up loads of references from other places, probably. But year one and The Long Halloween being in the same continuity, or at least loosely the same. They certainly don't contradict each other. Catwoman has like quite a rough background, a bit like in The Dark Knight Rises. She's looking after someone a bit younger. There's a hint of prostitution, I think, although I might have misremembered that. She had shorter hair, and she did turn out to be, well, at least she believed she was Falcone's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Because
you learn a bit more about her.
You've got The Long Halloween, and then you've got the sequel, which is almost as good, called Dark Victory, where he meets Robin for the first time. Mm-hmm. And at the same time as Dark Victory is taking place, Catwoman is in like a separate book in her own adventure in the same time frame called Catwoman When in Rome. And I think it ends up with like, it's never quite confirmed, but she's pretty sure that's her dad. The one thing I don't remember, though someone said it was in Earth 1, is this whole business of Martha being from the Arkham family. I don't recall that. But yeah, that
was interesting. I didn't know about that before.
That's everything. I think just a little bit of background on the film. I haven't really got a lot to say. I just want to say Matt Reeves, obviously we covered him he did 2 of the Planet of the Apes films. Everyone talks about his trilogy, forgetting he didn't do the first one of the 3.
It's kind of like Bourne, isn't it, really?
With, a little bit. Everyone thinks it's Greengrass series, and we'll come to that, obviously, very soon. But I first encountered him on Cloverfield. Now, Cloverfield was like very heavily marketed as like a J.J. Abrams product. And of course, when Matt Reeves' name was put next to it, it was like, oh, J.J.'s not doing it. Well, through the lens of talking about it now, it's like, well, that's pretty good news, to be fair. But at the time, it was a little bit like, well, he's just sticking his name on it and giving it to somebody else. He did a remake for Hammer of Let the Right One In as Let Me In, which, funnily enough, Charlie, who sometimes appears on this show, was watching yesterday. He put a reference to it on social media. Now, I've always thought he was a very good filmmaker. He definitely lacks levity, and his films could be a little bit overlong. But I think his track record in the last 10 years has actually exceeded Nolan's. Nolan had an amazing decade, and I've not liked his second decade anywhere near as much. This is casting came down for Robert Pattinson. It came down to him. It was written with him in mind, but him and Nicholas Hoult from the X-Men films were the final two.
His Batman would have been quite interesting.
The only other thing I want to say, though, is I just want to say quickly about budget. I just looked up The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Rises had a budget that's pitched somewhere, depending on source, between 250 and 300 million. This is somewhere in the 185 to 200 million range. So they've hedged their bets a little bit on how big a hit this is going to be. That's all I really want to say on background. Viewings. I will go first just quickly to say I saw it opening night and I saw it 2 days later. That's now a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I'm a couple of weeks out from having seen this. I saw it in IMAX on the opening night. Saw a regular 2D screening a couple of days later. What about you guys?
Yeah, I've seen it. I saw it opening day and then like a week or so afterwards. So I've only seen it twice. I think Becca's only seen it once, haven't you, Becca?
Yeah, I seen it once. I didn't see it opening week. It took me like a few more days. I kind of waited till the price came down a little bit because it's very expensive to go to the cinema these days. But yeah, no, I had a voucher, so that was quite nice. Didn't see it in IMAX, but saw it on the biggest screen that I could. And I definitely, if I can manage it, then I'll definitely try to see it again and notice all these little nods. Because I need to obviously see see the animated, see the other films as well. The ones that Dave mentioned. Also, I've seen all the other Batman movies. But yeah, just try and read those comics. And
Year one of the Long Halloween are worth seeing as a bit of background to this. I mean, they're all in on this. I mean, I've said the budget's a bit lower, but they've clearly got some belief in it because they're talking about 2 sequels, but they've also greenlit 2 television series. There's going to be one based around the Joker, not the Joker, sorry, the Penguin. But there was also going to be a spin-off around sort of the Gotham police in the year before this film, and then presumably developing alongside it. But that's actually developed into something based in Arkham Asylum.
It'll be more of a Batman extended universe, really, won't it? So
I'm assuming so. Of course, with the multiverse now, they can do anything and just say, well, it's all canon. It's just a different reality. Let's go into first thoughts. Chris?
So after first viewing... First off, I kind of like agree with what Dave said mostly about my Batman knowledge is pretty much basic. What the movies tell me and then stuff for the animated series. I'm not too averse to the comics, but generally I thought it's tonally it's really good in a really sort of dark way. So I picked up things like The Crow. I've loved the I love the atmosphere. I love the aesthetic of Gotham this time around, as opposed to Nolan, where in the last 2 films where it's Chicago, it's just New York. Actually, Gotham felt like a character. I liked having characters like the Penguin in there, whereas like not being like a focus of the movie, but just kind of like present. I think that's a good way of dealing with like the multitude of villains. It just adds character. I wish comic movies would do that more. Actually, I think rather than have like, let's have the focus on this villain or have these 2 villains and set them up and have their own little sort of start. They get their like. The movie's kind of about them, you see how they start off. It's like, well, we don't really need to see that. We could just have them like there. So I kind of like that. The main complaint, really, and I think this is probably the major flaw of the movie, is that it's way too long. Like the first viewing, I just felt that running time. Maybe because it's the first viewing, maybe because it's just so dour, but I just felt like 3 hours, and I just felt this just as kind of could have been a lot tighter. This could have have got on with it a lot more. At one point, I forgot that the Riddler was even in this. You know what I mean? So like it.
Yeah, they pack a lot in, don't they?
So I just felt like, right, okay, what movie are you doing? I didn't really feel the Riddler was very Riddly. Like, it wasn't very Riddler-esque. I just felt it was like they had the idea of like doing like obviously the Zodiac Killer.
He did not say "Surfs Up, Big Kahuna Burger" at least once.
No,
He
no,
wasn't
he
just
did
in
not.
like bright green lycra or had
Sorry, it's
red
Big
hair or
Kahuna.
something.
Big Kahuna Burger is Pulp Fiction. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big Kahuna.
But funny enough, I actually watched that not long afterwards,
Right.
just to get my Riddler sort of like, okay, let's just like
Let's watch a really annoying prick do this in a shorter
Did you
period
go back
of
to the
time.
original 1960s series?
and
Frank
With his
Gorshin,
purple
yeah.
attire.
and to be honest, that wasn't I can't say that interpretation of Riddler. Well, aesthetically, yes, and on paper, Jim Carrey is perfect, but obviously they just sort of like Jim Carrey let be Jim Carrey, and he just fucking overdoes everything. But also like
It's the same role.
the interpretation of it was just a bit too like right okay, so he doesn't do much Riddler stuff. He just kind of like he just tries to sort of build, he just makes this machine and tries to take over the world while Two-Face just sort of gurns. But anyway, that's Batman Forever. So I kind of like think we've not really had a good, honest to God, decent interpretation of the Riddler, because the way I take the Riddler is someone who is kind of like an egotistical, sort of like.
Showing you how clever he is.
Basically, he's got me. I think the only thing they probably got right in Forever was the fact that he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he just wants to just show the world like how, I am like the world's greatest genius, blah de blah de blah. And we haven't really had that, not at least in film form. And I think that'd be my one major criticism, how, in terms of like the interpretation of it, because while I think, yes, you could say like, yes, he's leaving puzzles to solve. Yes, it's very serial killery, that doesn't really get to the heart. And I think it's just kind of very like, it's a good idea to come up with, but then seeing it through, it's like, maybe you should have thought about it a bit more. Do you know what I mean? It felt a bit more about, yeah. I mean, to be fair, it is a lot more about Bruce Wayne, or Batman, and Gotham in general, to its credit. But again, this is like, I didn't really feel like this was like a good interpretation of the Riddler. That being said, I kind of liked Colin Farrell as Penguin. I thought he did a good job. He's basically doing like a Robert De Niro kind of impression. I thought, very much of a kind of like, just something about the way he kind of gurns at the camera, very much like kind of doing like a.
Yeah, I get that. I know the expression you're referring to. Yes.
Yeah, that kind of like, that typical mobster thing, which I kind of like, and they do sort of leave it to his like insecurities, how he's like a bit of an outsider in the mob world.
Well, I think that's where the Fredo thing came from.
Yeah.
The idea that like he's standing in the shadow of much more powerful people.
He's seen a lot more as a joke, the Penguin, because of like how he looks, and he's a bit like, and that's kind of like that's his thing. He's got a chip in his shoulder about that, and he's got something to prove.
And what did they have Fredo do? Run casinos, run nightclubs. Yeah. So, I don't thoroughly agree there's a complete crossover, but I at least see what they mean.
Yeah. And of course, it's nice to have the. Is it the Iceberg Lounge?
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
It's nice to actually see that as well.
Yeah.
As for Arbats, yeah, I was kind of. I thought he did a good job, considering it's a bit odd, considering how the impression I get from him, from his Batman and his Bruce Wayne, is that it's very much like he's in his early 20s, and yet he's like probably about more my age. He's probably about the same age as like.
No, I think he's meant to be about 30. I mean, it references that it's 20 years since his parents were killed.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think the murder of the mayor is on like the 20th anniversary. They were killed on Halloween night or something like that. In the earliest continuities, they'd gone to see the Mark of Zorro, but obviously that's now decades and decades ago. And yeah, I mean, I don't know that. I mean, typically, I mean, I'm sure there's a single canon answer of what age he was, but of not having that readily to mind. I think he's somewhere between 9 and 11 normally when his parents are killed. So if we split the difference and say 10, he's meant to be about 30. I think Pattinson's about 35 now.
He comes across as younger though. That's the thing. I
think it's the floppy hair doesn't help.
Yeah,
and he's still very slight, but even that I can deal with because for a few reasons. Firstly, I thought the Affleck version, and I don't want to get into the whole toxic Snyder conversation. You can go and find what I think of Zack Snyder elsewhere, but I don't really want to say anything particularly negative about Affleck. But his Batman was far too bulky. Something in the suit, and then with those tiny ears as well, he looked fat, even though he clearly wasn't, because out of the suit he was ripped. But it was just far too bulky. But there is a logical span of your life argument to it, that you've got all your speed when you're young, and then you sort of, as you lose that speed, you bulk up and rely more on power. Plus, I mean, in the suit, he bulks up quite nicely. But yeah, the floppy hair doesn't help. I'm not sure about that as a choice, although you can find that in comic books. I think what I would say is, I think he's like the fresh convert at this point. I know 2 years have gone by, but when you first get into something and you're really, 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 really into it, and I think that's where he is at the moment. He hasn't learnt to balance his life as Batman with his life as Bruce Wayne. Be that the real quote-unquote Bruce Wayne or some social construct of a Bruce Wayne that will do. At the moment, he's all about this. He's not about anything else, and hence his Bruce Wayne and his Batman are just virtually indistinguishable.
Well, I think I think you barely see him as Bruce Wayne, do you? It's only
But when he does, the voice isn't greatly different. It's a little bit quieter as Batman. I don't really have a problem with that, because he's much more low key. I mean, I always remember when Kilmer played it, and they put him in a cowl where he just went, "Well, you've just shaped that like Val Kilmer's face." I mean, if not for a second does that look like anyone else but Val Kilmer. Clooney was a little bit like that. Here, you could almost believe it. You know what I mean? Yeah, he does play a little bit younger, but I think you've got to take his early 30s.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think it's just the more vibe I got from it. I should say the floppy hair, the kind of like the mopey kind of grunge aesthetic is kind of.
He's also a bit of a moody teenager with Alfred. That's something I noticed, that he's still a bit resentful towards Alfred, and everything else.
You see grunge, I kind of got a bit of an emo vibe.
Well, you would do. There's Nirvana on the soundtrack for a start. There's Nirvana on the soundtrack. Of course you're going to get.
Well, exactly. It's the ultimate emo.
I actually, the first thing I did when I came home was look up Matt Reeves to see how old he was. Now, I've looked it up before because we've done the Planet of the Apes film, but I've clearly forgotten, right? And I'm looking him up because I'm absolutely convinced he has to be about the same age as me. Because he's like, well, you would have been in your teens when grunge happened, obviously, but no, he's actually about 10 years older than me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's born in like 66. But clearly,
he's just a big muso who loves his music.
Probably, but I mean, whatever. Yeah, but yeah, you were so
yeah,
sorry.
I kind of thought like he was like our age or something, because like Pattinson is like he's like sort of 30, early 30s, isn't he? Yeah, as he said, he's quite young.
Yeah. But
I thought it must be like our age or something. I was like, wow.
No, but sorry, Chris. I think I've dragged you off point. You'd got as far as Pattinson, and you were sort of talking about what you thought of everything.
Sorry, that's me going emo. Sorry.
It was me that took him off the point.
No, what I was going to say, we touched on it, how he basically isn't like, he's pretty much like, as Batman is like, Bruce Wayne isn't really kind of there. It's we don't see much of Alfred. I think that's another kind of bit of a shame. We don't get too much of a stuff with him and Alfred. Apart from that, I think the cast in general are pretty good. I just feel like the 3-hour runtime kind of really harms it, which I mean, I'm saying this like it's like not been a success, because obviously it's clearly doing well. So, and we're all more to averse to 3 hour movies, but why does everything need to be 3 hours? I don't know. But I think on this occasion, I think it's only like at the end, when they're doing the big set piece at the stadium, where it kind of like picked up for me. I felt like, oh, I kind of like woke up a little bit, but apart from that, I just felt it just dragged a bit. I just felt like, okay, I'm feeling the runtime, even though I wasn't like not disliking it. I just thought it's a long time to be sat in that cinema seat. So those are my first thoughts.
Yeah, I think my sort of biggest takeaway was probably like emo vibe, how kind of like mean and moody, and I mean, there's a sort of meme doing the rounds which kind of shows like the 60s and earliest Batman movies being kind of really vibrant and colourful, and then obviously you get the Nolan movies, which are kind of very grey, very dark, and this film, which is darker again, and then the next one in a few years' time is just literally a black tile. So we're kind of getting darker and darker until we need like night vision goggles to be able to see what goes on. Obviously, like in terms of like Gotham City itself, we kind of got like the 80s movies kind of looming large. Definitely, it's still very much a Gothic city. Obviously, that's where the name comes from. But as you said, it takes its influences from New York, from Chicago, from Liverpool. A very international kind of flavour to it, but it's still kind of very dark. It rains a lot. Crime-ridden streets, definitely a lot of neon. Obviously, Dave, you mentioned the influences there from like Times Square and from Madison Square Gardens. Sort of really vibrant hallmarks, of the cityscape. But again, very dark, very disturbing. Danger and crime and threat lurk around every corner. And it rains a lot. But yes, I think that was pretty cool. Similar to Chris, really, I kind of did feel the runtime a little bit. It dragged for me a little bit around the middle, but overall, I mean, it was like No Time to Die. Like, if you can survive that, that's really 3 goddamn hours. But you can survive that 8 or 9 times, like we did, like I did. And who was it? I can't remember his name. I do apologise. He's probably seen it about 8 or 9 times in IMAX now. So I think kudos goes to him for surviving this film for a long time. But yeah, I kind of did feel its runtime a little bit. I don't know if it really needed to be like 3 hours. But overall, apart from a little bit of dragging for me in the middle, it was fine. I still enjoyed it. It's a fresh take on Batman. As I say, we haven't seen this angle on Batman before. Like, we've seen like the handsome playboy, brooding, alter ego. But I think Bat's kind of, he's kind of moved on and matured, like from his vampire, teen crush type roles. Kind of brings a new face to the role, which is really good to see. And some with Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman as well. Again, it's a new side, and it kind of goes back to his early heroines like Eartha Kitt, for example. Dare I even say Halle Berry as well, and a fresh twist on a classic role, being much more nuanced and much more delicate, but also much more independent, and not just like a sex or status symbol, but she's going to sort of basically take on the world as her own, so like, this is what I want to do, this is where I'm coming from, I'm going to put my stamp on it, and screw you, Batman, I'm not going to kind of work with you so easily, and things like that. Big shocker for me, Colin Farrell as the Penguin. I was like, oh my god, I didn't even know it was him. Who else have we got? We've got, oh god, I can't remember his name, Jeffrey Wright. Oh my god, I totally forgot that he was in the film as well. It was absolute joy to see him after losing him as Felix in No Time to Die, spoiler alert. It was great to see him pop up again as Commissioner.
Wait, what? He dies in No Time to Die?
I know, it's like, oh my
You're
God.
supposed to say spoiler alert before the spoiler.
Spoiler alert.
You're not supposed to say after he died. Oh,
Bugger.
Spoiler alert.
It came out end of last year. You need to go see it. So I've got a theory that he didn't actually die. He just moved to Gotham and became the Commissioner. That's how it happened.
Stuck on a very unconvincing wig.
Obviously, that's not what happens. Obviously. What else? Yeah, Andy Serkis as Alfred. Yeah, I don't kind of feel like more of a cameo role. I kind of feel like perhaps we might want to learn more about him. Maybe I need to go back and read all these comics that it's based on.
I mean, what, you want to watch him cook a lemon meringue or something?
Yes. Go back and make that quiche.
All right.
Learn about his time in the military, and I kind of feel like in the past, from various Alfreds, we've perhaps only got a flavour of it. I'm still intermittently trying to work my way through Gotham, just the TV series. So I'm kind of pick it up and drop it. So I need to get back on that bandwagon.
I do feel that's a bit like watching a show about Pamela Anderson before she grew any tits. It's like, what's the point?
It's a little bit pointless, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I think it's got a good cast, to be honest.
Yeah.
What else? GKO's score really effective. Although for me, this is going to sound really stupid. I say a lot of stupid things on this podcast. I should be used to it by now. But I feel like a lot of the Batman theme, for example, it reminded me a lot of the music from Star Wars. I know that's really stupid, but it sounds like very sort of really heavy, quite moody, but really quite in keeping with the character. And that kind of the sort of Batman theme that GK has created, I think is really memorable. I think it's probably one of the best themes for the series. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. It's very mean, very moody, very dark. I'm glad it wasn't in 3D because we really would have suffered with the 30% light loss. We just needed that 30%, so we could see what was going on. Great casting, brilliant performances. A little bit too long. Paul Dano as the Riddler. It's suitably demented. But yeah, I kind of feel like he wasn't. Obviously, my frame of reference is going to be Jim Carrey, unfortunately. But this is completely different, utterly completely different. And we were talking about this on another thread. Kind of got more of, as you say, like Zodiac or the guy from
Seven?
the other film, can't remember what it's called. Seven, that's it. Yeah, that's the one. And also Saw, that kind of that kind of vibe as well, or those kind of body horror type films. But no, he's really good. I think I kind of forgotten about him as an actor, unfortunately. So I went back and kind of saw some of his other earlier films, and he's again one of those actors that can kind of almost fit into any kind of role. There
Will Be Blood is the film I think of first when I think of it.
Definitely, yeah. That's the first one I went to, and that was fantastic. That kind of won all the plaudits, when it came out, rightly so. But he's one of sort of like chameleonic type actors who can really take on any role and kind of make it his own. And this was probably the most different, seen from him. But he did really, wasn't quite sure which way he was going to go. And yeah, very, very strange, very twisted and a bit bizarre. But a brilliant performance through and through for sure. Despite all that, I actually quite enjoyed it, even though it's 3 hours long and quite dingy and quite dark. But no, very good. So I'm kind of looking forward to to seeing where Arbats goes next, and where they go next with this particular series. So yeah, I enjoyed it. 4 out of 5.
It was vaguely hinted at in The Dark Knight, in that there was a bit where he's sat in Wayne Enterprises and he's fallen asleep. While they meet, he's there in his suit in the boardroom, but he's fallen asleep.
Oh yeah, they're having the board meeting.
And it just reminded me, and I cannot remember what Batman book it is. I can't remember. It might be one of the ones I've referenced, but I can't remember. Like, he's at some kind of business meeting, and he's just staring out the window, and he's really, really bored. And he's watching
the board meeting.
He's watching the sun go down. And when the sun's finally down, he's like, he's alive. It's his time. He's ready. It always gets put really badly. Batman's the real him. It's like, well, clearly not. He was raised as a boy called Bruce Wayne. He wasn't born in Sicilia. But yes, I think the idea of that as his real purpose is actually explained here better than Katie Holmes touching Bale's face and going, "This is your mask." It's like and I'm not knocking those films at all because I love those films. And the one thing you won't get me to say tonight, because I don't know yet, is whether I prefer it to any of the Nolan films. Well, I certainly prefer it to The Dark Knight Rises, but certainly...
Yeah, I think that'll come with time, won't it? But I think it's just handled in a different way, isn't it? Try to make him a bit more human and trying to move away from the whole...
What I will say was, as a younger kid, Batman wasn't a favourite of mine. He didn't have powers or anything, and I've talked about all this before, but I went through a handful of very specific books and comic, and aesthetics of Batman that I absolutely adored. This has put it on film for the first time. This is the closest I'm going to get to a live action Long Halloween. Why? Because they're never going to make Gotham aside, which is something very different. They're never going to make Batman their sort of A-lister, a television show. In and of itself, it's always, they might do spin-offs, but it's never going to be Batman's primary thing. Is that the closest you're going to get is like animated or whatever, and the Long Halloween done properly would have to be very episodic and very long. So the closest you're going to get is a rather long film that understands the things that have come into making the character what he is. Even the Batman, he was referred to as the Batman very early in his life. Why? Because he was based on the Shadow and things like that. And I like that. I've always liked the Batman as his moniker. You're never going to get away from a degree of like Kevlar and bulletproof and steel and all that now. He's not going to run around in tights, right? But it is black and grey, which is what it should be. Affleck was too as well, but he just looked like he'd ate too many donuts. And the problem with the Affleck version of the character, and I'm sorry, Snyder fans, and I had some nice things to say about his version of Justice League, but that incarnation of Batman was thick as shit, right? Lex Luthor wound him up and then pointed him at Superman. And this is meant to be like the world's greatest detective. It's like, fuck off, that's really dumb. So I don't really like superheroes in the Batman world. I'm aware of DC, whose property it is, does do that, but I think he does play better when he's a bit grounded. But the one thing I liked about the Batman that Affleck came up with is the bit that never got realised in the Suicide Squad. We got Suicide Squad, the original version that Affleck.
I have to say which one.
Well, the Suicide Squad is James Gunn, isn't it? But Suicide Squad, the one that came out same year as Batman and Superman make a porno. They had a shot of Arkham Asylum, and it had this heightened reality, a bit like the Arkham games, where you could imagine that feeling kind of realistic, and yet someone like Poison Ivy existing in that world. And I'm not sure this is quite that. And I'll be interested to see how Arkham looks when we see it properly. But I do think that we've got a world that looks like the harder end of the comic book world that I really, really like. And it's got Batman as a detective, which you almost never get. And also, I think most people who've ever directed him must think somewhere, consciously or subconsciously, that he looks a bit stupid. Because they really do... Firstly, they put him in a black, so they don't have to show it up too much. And secondly, they play heavily on his disappearing skills. I mean, Nolan was doing that constantly. The only place we saw it in this film is where he happened on the video of his dad.
That was a bit of a sort of Nolan hallmark of his Batman, really, wasn't it?
But when you read a Batman comic, he'll frequently be in a reasonably well-lit room talking with everybody. And if you said to me, we could do that...
comes from like the old, like the comics, or like from the old series where like you just see like an explosion and then he'd vanish, sort of thing.
I don't know about that.
Vanish.
But
I
definitely vanishing is a bit a part of him. But what I'm saying is that in the comic books, he stands around and works things out with people, and I'm thinking, how do you do that in live action where you get a proper detective show, but he still looks intimidating, he still feels like this mysterious thing striking from the shadows? And the film does it quite early. You've got the villain seeing the bat signal, and then just imagining him all these places he's not, and then when he does appear,
the score really works well with that.
The score really works.
Definitely. It does really well.
What have we've stressed physical presence. The Foley work. He's got really heavy feet that he walks very deliberately on, and he just.
We've got that scene like where he's at the sort of police station, and he's literally walking down the hall, and all the other sort of cops are just like, who the hell, there's that guy. And
but when he enters, he normally enters quite slowly. And very deliberately on very, very heavy feet. And it's just stressing his physical presence. So because they do that, and because he's playing him quite internal, a bit like a Keaton, I suppose, he maintains a bit of an air of mystery in that he'll say the odd thing to detectives, but largely you're seeing his eyes and he's thinking, and then he'll turn and say something, and he's still got this mysterious, slightly unquieting tone to him. I mean, imagine if that was George Clooney, just stood in the room. It's like, he'd be ordering the pizzas for everyone. I think
we're getting coffee in for everybody.
I think what I would just say, because I want to try and keep this bit brief, is that first off, let's just quickly address some of the things you've just said. The length. I can't really disagree. I mean, 2 hours and 56 minutes looked intimidating. And you could probably have tightened it down by 20, 25 minutes and no one would have complained. 2 hours 35 feels different. Because this feels like, 3 hours, not 2.5 or near to. So there's that. But it didn't bother me. And I think part of it is because I keep mentioning the long Halloween and things like that. They took a long time to read. You know what I mean? I'm quite happy to just hang out in this world. So it didn't bother me, but I can't argue it isn't certainly on the long side. I think actually I'm slightly different from Chris in that although thematically I understand entirely why and what's happening and I can talk to the themes of this film quite well, I actually was far less interested in the action at the end. I thought the last 20 minutes were amongst the weakest. I was much more interested before that. I thought all of that could have done with tightening. But I did enjoy it very, very much.
Yeah,
and
I
think
to clarify, it wasn't like, this is like, this. I think it was more a change in tempo. It's like, it's like...
Something's happening. Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. But this is kind of, without knowing it...
Things felt exciting rather than like, this is an interesting idea. This is like...
Yeah, it's the Batman I always wanted. And I think there's a degree that he's been reasonably faithful to certain aspects of Batman's history without being imprisoned by it. There's no Wayne Manor. He lives in a high-rise. That makes sense to me. The Riddler takes the essence of the character and then just fits it around thematically what this film's going to do. Well, actually, the funny thing is, the one critique I read of this was somebody said he's just a carbon copy of the Joker, and it's like, yes, if you talk about a film going into like the news stations of him threatening someone, yes, but the Joker
that's not really like
but that's
thought out criticism, is it really?
Because the Joker wanted nothing but chaos. In some respects, the Joker wanted nothing. This is, without being a cliche, this is a guy who had some of the same upbringing as Bruce, or at least some of the same roots as Bruce. And he has got a completely bloodshot idea of what making a difference is. He's Bruce if Bruce had a completely different upbringing. He thinks he's doing the right thing. He is a superhero in his own head. And he honestly thinks when he calls Bruce in, because he says Bruce Wayne over and over again, and you keep thinking he knows who he is. He doesn't know who he is. He's obsessed with Bruce Wayne because Bruce Wayne is his origin story. He thinks Batman is going to sit with him and they'll enjoy all the chaos together. He has no conception. In many respects, he's far, far madder than the Joker. The Joker was just an anarchist, and they're different types of escalation. They both share the similar theme with The Dark Knight of escalation. But whereas Nolan it's chaos, with this, it's more about Bruce.
It's more deliberate.
It's more deliberate, but not only that, we'll talk about the whole vengeance thing in a minute. It's about Bruce learning to be more complete, which is something Michael Corleone never learnt in The Godfather, another sort of Godfather parallel, I suppose. But I felt that... I felt that, yes, it was on the long side, but I mean, there were so many things about it that I didn't know I wanted till I saw. Like that Batmobile, I think I saw a still of it a while back, and I just thought, what's this, the fucking Dukes of Hazzard? And when it was finally done, I thought, this is so much more logical than, if you see the Tumbler in the Nolan films, and I'm not going to say too much negative about the Nolan films, I like them, but it wouldn't be hard to trace that back to Wayne Enterprises. In fact, one guy does. Not many people are out buying vehicles like that. I'm not ready to rank it. I think stylistically, the world is the Batman I wanted. So if you said to me, they all start now, right? They're all the same age as they were when they started, and they can be adapted to the themes of today as much as necessary, but you can have half a dozen Keaton films, half a dozen Kilmer films if you want, half a dozen Bale films, half a dozen Affleck films, whatever they would be, or half a dozen of these. I would unquestionably take this world, because this is the Gotham world I always wanted. It's the most interesting version of Gotham I've seen. I got so pissed off by The Dark Knight Rises, where he just pointed a camera at New York and went, that'll do. The fact it's raining all the time, you could think it's overkill, but it's almost a city that can't get clean. you know, and I like that. Is it the best Batman film? I'm a very, very long way from saying that, but I couldn't actually have loved it anymore.
Oh, Batman and Robin is, surely.
It kept giving me all these things that I didn't know I wanted, and I was like, that's perfect. Oh, that's perfect. Yes, I love that. Oh, yes, I recognise that. Oh my God, that's just like my favourite comic book. But you haven't just done. See, Snyder referenced loads of comic books. He referenced, you know, the Dark Knight Returns and loads of others that are slipping my mind now. But it was all this potch mismatch of just cool images from. Matt Reeves has taken it and fashioned it into a story that lasts a week. The Long Halloween lasts a year. You know, he's actually told a very different story. And he's taken from the best. I don't know if it's him. I don't know if it's co-writer. I don't know who the hardcore Batman films are here. Fans are, not films. Batman fans are here. But they've picked all the things I'd want them to pick. Matt Reeves lacks a little bit of levity in places, and I think that's true here. But I enjoyed it so much. Funnily enough, the weakest thing in the film for me, and it's not really a complaint, it was just he didn't stand out so much. Jeffrey Wright seemed a bit... I just think Gordon lacked a little bit of character, and that might be because they made quite an effort with Gary Oldman's. He's just grizzled.
I agree with Jeffrey Wright. I mean, both actors are obviously hugely talented, but I kind of feel like with Jeffrey Wright, it's more like understatement. You know, he'll play it like very understated and let that kind of stand for itself.
Well, just to finish the thought, right? It's not that he did anything wrong. It's just that he feels straight from central casting, which sounds odd when he's a person of colour, but straight from central casting, give me someone jaded and a bit grizzled, but essentially decent. And he's nothing more than that. Well, at this stage, he might well grow into much, much more.
He's perfect fit for the role. Like it's, I think he's like, absolutely perfectly fine. He fits that sort of type. Just
Got no issue with the casting. I just think a little bit more meat.
I just think for me, I know what you say. I kind of see where you come in, and I kind of agree, because of one of the points on that first initial viewing, when I was like, God, I'm feeling this runtime. I can't remember which scene it was, but it was one of there's quite a number of scenes with Batman and Gordon, and Batman's talking like this, and Gordon's talking like this, and they're just like, I'm like thinking, this is almost coming like a parody of itself. Like everyone's talking so like dark and like and gruffled, and just thinking, I understand, you don't have to have levity, but my God, there was those times where like everyone's kind of like being gruff and grumbly half the time, and I don't
mind grimdark, providing we're not only getting grimdark. There's a world of like comic books, films, and there's room for everything. And I prefer my Batman quite dark. What I don't just want is stylistically dark. Like Snyder doesn't understand the difference between adult looking and actually adult. And as I say, his Bruce Wayne was absolutely thick as pig shit. But you could look at him and go, well, he's comic book accurate, and you go, well, yeah, there's bits in this that are a bit like the Arkham Asylum game, and there's a shot in it that's like the Dark Knight Returns, and he's playing the part of a playboy, which is what he does in several comic books. But Bruce Wayne is a fucking genius, and you've just wound him up and pointed him at Superman. He's thick,
Well, here's the thing about like Batman. Now, maybe no, fair enough. Mine mostly guided by the movies or whatever, and I know like Batman is like renowned as like the greatest detective.
Yeah.
But like, where the fuck does that even come from? Like he's a billionaire. Is he just naturally gifted detective?
I think this is where I lack knowledge. But I mean, he did basically leave Gotham and disappear for 7 years and just came back trained in fucking everything. Part of it is he's naturally a genius. Part of it is, the training he puts himself through. Some of it is tech. Obviously, he has various tools that will help him find things out. The films have never really... You had a bit in The Dark Knight where he tried to reconstruct a bullet. And that is about it. He hasn't done a lot of detective work. And a lot of people have pointed to this and said, well, actually, he didn't work that out and that crime already happened. And you go, well, no, it's not that... I think World's Greatest Detective, although it's a moniker given to him, is a little bit unhelpful. because quite often with Batman, he's trying to sort the pattern and get ahead of the crimes, and if he solved it in 2 pages, that wouldn't really work. He's often given quite complex things to work out, but effectively he appeared in Detective Comics, right? And that's what it was. It was like, it was an attempt to marry sort of the Detective Comics to the sort of, the new superhero genre which Superman had launched. And I'm not an expert any further than that, but this is the Batman world I always wanted. Whether it's the Batman film I always wanted, well, I suppose you can argue about, but it certainly does pick from loads of things I like and do it absolutely perfectly. And
I was going to say, is this like the Batman
anything
movie
I
that you
say
wanted?
against this film is just going to be absolute nitpicking. So with that, shall we discuss this film sequentially?
We start with like binocular shot of what I thought at the time was like we were seeing like a young Bruce Wayne and his dad.
Yeah, actually
the
that
time.
makes sense.
I've been like Catwoman, perhaps. I thought that was
Well,
quite interesting.
we sort
I was
of
like,
are
"Ooh, who's
20
this?"
years later, because we find out. I mean, this is Rupert Penry-Jones. Rupert Penry-Jones is probably best known for his role in Spooks.
But he was in the film as well. Oh my gosh.
Best known in Spooks. It was annoying me during the film because I recognised him and couldn't place him. I had to look when it finished. But he was best known. He was in 3 or 4 seasons of BBC show Spooks. Those of you in America I think it wasn't called Spooks over there. It was called MI5 or something like that.
MI5, not 9 to 5.
But he was in like 3 or 4 seasons of that as like MI5 is like the domestic version of MI6. So it's like it's Secret Service but domestic. So it deals with domestic terrorism and that sort of thing.
Would it be like more FBI?
Quite famous.
Would it be a bit more like FBI, like equivalent of the FBI, or would that? Am I just thinking?
I don't know, because that's still cross-state crimes. I'm sure they're not interested in like murders and that sort of thing. I don't know, but yeah, just think James Bond, but not operating around the world, operating in the UK. But anyway, it kind of is, because what's happening is he's stood watching a video, and I didn't get this until second viewing, because he's watching a video of the previous night's debate between him and his challenger, the Bella Real's character. But on the screen, on first viewing, it didn't look like him. So I thought he was
watching it live, and he was like.
I actually thought what it was he was at the end of his term, because you got term limits in America, and he was watching the 2 people vying to replace him. But I saw it on second viewing that it is actually him, and he's watching his debate back from the previous night. Now, we'll just to skip over what happens, because he gets murdered, but when Batman is there, he sees a young boy. It's Halloween night. His parents just been killed, or a parent's just been killed. And it's obviously reminding him, because his parents were killed around the same time of the year, 20 years before, and his father, we find out, was running for mayor. So it's all a bit close to home for him. But yeah, he's attacked by a strange figure in a mask who basically beats him to death.
Yes, and sort of tapes him up.
And he's got framed like newspaper articles and front pages around his office, his den, whatever you want to call it. It's his home, but it's probably like his den, I suppose. And he's daubed "No More Lies" over it. Yeah,
and he leaves a note for the Batman with a riddle. So
go on.
No, so I was going to say we next see. Well, unless you want to elaborate on that.
No, I don't really. I think the only thing I want to just say is, we've been told this is year 2. I mean, that's technically he's towards the end of his second year as the Batman. Yeah. And so he's almost going into year 3, really. Yeah. And he's a lieutenant at this point. James Gordon, turns up with him. So he's already built some kind of reputation and some relationships.
Yes, so it's like we kind of get dropped straight into it, even though. No, I'll pick that up at the end. I was going to say, but anyway, yeah. So we get dropped straight up into it, and I think this is what you mean, where it's just like Batman just hanging around, talking to people. I think that it has to look dark really for it to look right. Because...
And he has to be careful how chummy he gets. He can't just go, yes, I'll have a latte or something.
Yeah,
Are we thinking of that waistline?
Because it'll start to look a bit like, you know, a bit ridiculous, you know. And
would you like a donut, Mr. Batman?
I'll take 2. No. Maybe that's what happened to Batfleck as well. As you say, like, he wasn't, you know, fat or anything like that, but he was quite buff. So maybe that's what it was. He was hiding all those donuts in his batsuit.
Affleck was in wonderful shape. The suit was just very bulky. That's all.
Yeah, no, definitely, no. He was definitely fine. It was just a really quite a big suit.
To be fair, the one thing I must just add this: if you
With
go
a lot of
and
pockets,
read,
a lot of space.
if you go and read The Dark Knight Returns, he's very bulky in that, although he's meant to be 55 years of age at that point. So I can see what Schneider was going for. I just never really liked that aesthetic, although I liked the idea that it was. I like the fact that he was finally in grey and black. But yeah, we're at a crime scene where basically the mayor has just, the incumbent mayor has just been killed. Funny thing, right? Did any of you ever, I haven't watched it in 20 years, but did any of you ever watch EastEnders at any point in your life?
Yeah, so basically Trevor's the...
Yeah.
I would never have picked that up.
I've just found this out myself. I just
the police commissioner was evil Trevor.
Where do I know that man from? Oh, he's from EastEnders.
Yeah, but he was a young, good-looking guy back then.
That was like 20 years ago.
I know. The police commissioner played a wife beater in like. Britain has 2 very, very popular like evening soap operas.
We have many different soaps, but the 2 main ones.
The 2 main ones. He was quite a nasty Scottish wife beater in that. And here it's like no trace of the Scottish, and he's aged 2 decades. And
it's Alex somebody or other, isn't it? He's probably done loads of TV in that sense, but I was like, what's he done since?
And he's gained about 40 pounds in weight as well.
See, I thought it was someone else. You see, when she came on, I was like, I can't remember the actor's name, but and I'll try and.
You just knew it was that guy from EastEnders.
Yeah, I'll try.
Actually, that was probably like the 3 surprises. It was obviously Ricky Penry-Jones, who I remember from one of his first feature films, where he basically appeared half naked. Spooks.
Which half?
Alex somebody or other. I can't remember his name. I'll look him up on IMDb.com. And Colin Farrell. There was like 3 big surprises for me in this film. I was like, wow.
Yeah. So, to cut, because we could get very heavy into this because it's a 3-hour film, but to speed things along.
Yeah, that's not.
There's his thumb's been removed, and it's a play on the thumb drive term that's been left in a car, which is what the riddle hints at. And it's got images of the mayor with a woman at the Iceberg Lounge, which is operated by a guy known to the police as the Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot, and he has links to Carmine Falcone, like the main mafia boss in the city, who is like a Vito Corleone analogue in the comic books generally, right down to having a bit of a soppy son called Alberto, which isn't referenced in this film. So Batman goes to visit that club. Is that jumping on too far, or is that fair enough?
No, we might as well, because it is a long film, so we might as well sort of make...
Well, so when he goes to the lounge, he meets the Penguin. Nice sort of mirroring when Bruce Wayne goes later and says, "Do you know who I am?" Exactly the same way. And the Penguin is Selena Kyle comes out and sort of gives him something, and she hands something back, and it looks very like she's into the. You keep getting references to drops and drop heads. That's the drug in this universe. And you think she's involved with that. She's actually Annika's roommate, and it might maybe imply they're romantically involved.
Yes, or there's certainly like a close friendship anyway.
Yeah, but she's calling her baby on the phone and then touching her face when they meet up. And
right.
It's at least suggested, and I know Zoe Kravitz said that she assumed from the script that she was playing the role bisexual. And that's been in various continuities over the years. But basically, Annika there was a waitress, and she's obviously, as we find out through the film, being farmed out to various men of power, one of whom is the mayor, who happened to have a passport in a safe at his house.
Yeah, and then don't we find out? So yeah, she goes up to his house, and then Batman meets up with Catwoman, have a little fisticuff, and
Well, the thing it's worth just saying is we're going to talk about it, and I think the film does it subtly would be the wrong word because it is very obvious. But if there's one thing it does have over the Nolan films, and I'm jumping around a bit here, but people used to say about Nolan that his biggest flaw was action, and I always said no, his biggest flaw is dialogue, because he has the same flaw. He's a better filmmaker, but he has the same flaw of George Lucas, that he has the characters stand around and talk about the themes and the plot to each other. And of course, because Batman has a journal in this film, you're mimicking the internal dialogue of the film, so you don't actually need them to all stand around and explain things to each other. So whereas, all the themes of escalation were talked about openly in the Nolan films, here we're allowed to infer it for ourselves. The opening shot of the film is the Riddler spying on the thing, and now we've got Batman doing the same thing. They have similarities as characters. Selina goes home to talk to Annika. Annika eventually sort of disappears because Batman goes off with her. And we find out that, what do we find out? Everybody's involved. This nightclub has got the police commissioner going there, the mayor going there, the district attorney going there. The district attorney, funnily enough, the district attorney is played by Peter Sarsgaard. Peter Sarsgaard is the partner of and father of the children of Maggie Gyllenhaal, who was in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. Oh, The Dark Knight. I was about to say The Dark Knight Rises. She was dead by then. So no, that wasn't going to happen. So Annika does disappear, and that sort of fuels Selina's.
Yeah. So then the commission's picked off at some point as well, hasn't he? He has.
Well, we don't. I don't think. We. That's the bit that where if you're gonna make the link to the Joker in the Nolan films, this is where you'll do it, because the Joker sent in a video to the news of him killing one of these, teasing and then killing one of these Batman knockoffs. Here he's got a video of him with the commissioner, and it's something to do with rats. It's a 1984 reference, isn't it? Room 101 it was a TV show in Britain. It was about getting rid of all the things that you hate the most. Room 101 comes from 1984, and it was to do with the main character Winston had a fear of rats, and they were sort of put in a cage right by his face, and that it was like he was being threatened with his face being eaten off, and that's what we've got here. But it's all playing games with Gordon and the Batman about what is it? He's, no more lies. Why is he abducting major public figures and implying they're part of something rancid within this city? So Savage gets killed. That's dealt with quite quickly, and it's not long after the mayor's killing. The one with Coulson, that name rings a bell, Gil Coulson. I'm sure that's a reference to something. I don't know if it's a comic book or it reminds me of something else. I'm not sure. But see, Peter Sarsgaard's character, now Batman, and I quite like this because he's always had high tech, and he wears what are they called? On your eyes.
Yeah, like contacts.
Contact. I couldn't think of the words. Contact lenses. I think his eye colour's slightly different when they're in, so that's partly a disguise, but also they video everything he sees, so we can go through the footage in the morning and check back on things, pick up on clues and everything. And he gets Selina to wear one of these and go to the nightclub. And she she sees Gil Coulson, but because Bruce is not quite sure what he's seen, he gets her to look at him a bit longer. And she says, well, if I look at him longer, he's going to come over here. Because effectively, I think they're all effectively sex workers in that lounge. Effectively. Or at least trafficked in some way. And of course, she gets into a long conversation with a rather inebriated district attorney. And Yeah, I don't really.
He's clearly shitting himself as well, because he's like, shit, I you know, two of my so-called colleagues have just been brutally murdered, and like, you know, we're all on edge because, you know, we could be next.
Well, no more lies. That they're aware of something, and the film has made reference to, and again, another character that it was Eric Roberts in the Nolan film, Salvatore Moroni. Effectively, him and Falcone are competing mob bosses in many of the continuities. And the film makes reference to the fact that the biggest drug bust that ever happened was Salvatore Moroni, and presumably he was put away. I'm presuming he's alive and in like Blackgate prison or whatever in this continuity. And something is not quite right with that bust. I think even though you'd have to be pretty on the ball to figure out what the problem is, I think you wouldn't have to think too hard to know that it's something to do with that. And it's all the people involved with that. Now, again, in many continuities, James Gordon moves in from somewhere else. James Gordon won't have been in the city when this happened, although in this continuity he said he did work that case.
But I imagine it'll be like lower level.
Yes, it's that, and he's not corrupt. So, the Riddler abducts Coulson in his car. Every time he abducts someone or kills someone, you hear that sort of masking tape being unrolled, which is kind of grim in itself. And he straps a bomb to his neck, and sends him to the... I don't know if it's a funeral or it's a memorial. Probably a funeral, given the whole time frame of this thing is a week. And that's where they go to St. George's Hall. Now, I lived in Liverpool for 5 years, but I never went inside George's Hall, so I don't know if the inside shots are there. Chris, you live up that way. Have you ever been into St. George's Hall?
No, I've never been inside myself, no.
No, I mean, I lived there for years. I walked past it all the time, but never went inside.
I mean, it looks like it could be, though.
It looks like it could be. I mean, they've definitely built a cohesive world here. So we go to the funeral. He sees the boy again, Mitchell's son. And of course, he's Bruce at this point. He's dressed as Bruce. In between, I just want to make quick reference to when he sees Alfred. Just
a quick update. I've just googled images, and I don't think so by looking what I see.
Okay, I wouldn't have thought so either, because inside and outside are very rarely the same things in any of these mediums. But I do think that I do need to make reference quickly back to when you first see him in the Batcave, which is not an aesthetic I particularly like, the Batcave, but okay. And he's talking to Alfred, and his relationship with Alfred is noticeably cold. Again, it will warm up through the events of the film. It will warm up over time and installments, but it's cold at this point. I don't know if it's a mixture of Bruce resenting the fact this guy brought him up, or the fact that Alfred feels guilty that Bruce didn't have his parents around, or whatever. I'm not sure, but they're very cold with each other. And I do feel like he goes to the funeral, but the point is that he doesn't get involved in Wayne Enterprises. Alfred is trying to get like the board or the shareholders or whatever it is to come round to like their apartment, because he's not going in, because he's absolutely like the new recruit to being Batman. That's all he thinks about. But the salient points are, I think that the mayoral candidate talks to him about wanting to work with the Wayne family, because he's the richest man in town, to do more sort of charity work or more regeneration work. We keep hearing talk about this sort of regeneration program that's been in place for years, that was funded by Thomas Wayne, but we find out later in the film was just a slush fund for like nefarious activities. He goes to the boy. That's relevant here, but we're straight into the collar bomb, basically, aren't we?
Yeah, it's a car sort of drives straight into the place, and they clear the area, and it's the Riddler has a phone taped to him. There's a message for the Batman, and so he kind of has to answer like 3 questions honestly, otherwise he'll get the code and set him free. One is like is what he did was like basically a bribe, wasn't it? He has to admit that he accepted the bribe. One was like how much, I believe it was.
Right, the first one was it was a play on justice.
Oh yeah.
Because I got that one, watching it sort of live at the time. I mean, I don't think it's the hardest riddle in the world, by the way. But he said blind and 2 other things, and it was like, well, that's justice. I'd said it almost out loud.
Mm.
The second one was about his bride price,
Mm.
which turned out to be 10 grand or something. And then the third one was about giving a name, which he wouldn't do. And admittedly, for all this guy's faults, I think he knew he was going to die here. But he was like, no, I can't. Once I'm a target for the ultimate rat, who we won't reveal at this point, but we'll come to, my family are going to be at risk. So he effectively lets himself die here.
Yeah, which is kind of like, well, like the hell's going to be on me and my family, so it might as well just be me.
That makes Batman and Gordon. We'll just quickly go through the scene that Batman is blown backwards by this sort of bomb because he can.
Yeah.
I'm amazed he survives it so well, but
unscathed.
he does. Unscathed. Well, he's knocked out anyway, and he wakes up in police headquarters, and everyone says, "Why didn't they take the mask off him?" Well, that's why Gordon was there. Gordon, I think, in most continuities, doesn't actually want to unmask this guy. But they deduce from this that, because it's all to do with drugs and informants, they think it might be the Penguin, and they find that Maroni's operation just went straight to Falcone with Gotham police involved. So they go. This is leading to the big car chase, basically, isn't it? They go to.
Yeah, so he escapes. He punches Gordon out and.
He escapes and jumps off the Liver building.
Yes. And then
I think this is where they go straight to sort of bust the Penguin, and Selina turns up to steal money.
Yeah, because they think it's the Penguin, so
yeah.
So they think so they discover that Marconi's operation transfers to Falcone, with many.
They think it's gone to the Penguin at this stage.
Yeah.
But it turns out not to be the case. They do work out it's not actually the Penguin. And there's the El Rata Retada, yeah.
Yeah.
And they find Annika's corpse.
Worries.
Selina finds Annika's corpse as well. She's like dead in the car trunk.
Yeah.
And this just leads to basically the car chase, doesn't it?
Yeah. There's a big shootout and the big car chase, which is the scene is in all the trailers. In walking slowly.
I got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's in all the trailers.
Doing his De Niro like.
That's when you said earlier he was like De Niro. That's exactly the scene I pictured.
Yeah, actually
I got that vibe as well. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's the kind of vibe I got.
Do you know what it reminded me of? It was because De Niro. Well, he's gained and lost a bit like Bale. He's gained and lost weight several times, but he gained weight to play Al Capone in The Untouchables.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he did try to transform himself quite a bit, didn't he?
That's not unlike this.
Which is weird because apparently like the studios wanted De Niro, but they like.
Oh really?
They're in.
I've told this story on one of our podcasts before.
Yeah.
I was say yeah. I think
Bob Hoskins walked away for $250,000 not to do anything, but they were up front with him. They wanted De Niro, and they said if we can't get De Niro, we'll go for Bob Hoskins. So they went to Bob Hoskins and they said. And Bob Hoskins, it was never heated, but I got the impression Bob Hoskins said to them, well, you either want me or De Niro, surely. And they said,
make your mind up.
And they said, well, how about this? We give you $250,000. And if he doesn't turn up, it's yours. And if he does turn up, take the money. And that it is rumoured that it was exactly the same deal with John Gavin for Diamonds Are Forever, that they wanted Lazenby back, or the James Bond of the time, Sean Connery, back, but they basically gave him $500,000 as like a contingency.
Yeah.
To stop him doing anything else, basically. That it's not just like for their ego. It's like, well, if we don't give Bob Hoskins this, he might go off and do another film with like Neil Jordan or something. So yeah, that was what that story was. But definitely, This is De Niro in body language, and when I look at the physical type, I go, actually reminds me a little bit of his Al Capone.
The thing is, if you Google Al Capone, you actually see what he looks like. You're thinking Hoskins is like the perfect casting.
Well, the funny thing is, when I first watched the film, I'd have been too young, because I'm sure I first saw it at about 13 or something. But certainly, I watched it in my later teens, I think. And I remember watching it and thinking, I can imagine Bob Hoskins in this. Genuinely, that is true. And years later, Bob Hoskins told that story, and I'm thinking, yeah, they're basically the same vibe.
Yeah. Funny enough, though, I could actually see back in the day Bob Hoskins doing a good Penguin, so which is not...
Wow, maybe.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good idea, actually.
Yeah, but yeah, no. I think the thing that really sort of struck me about De Niro, well, apart from that bit, was the in this film, sorry, about Foul Doomed, is the kind of when he first pops up with Batman, he says, "Take it easy, sweetheart." You know, he kind of has, he kind of had that like hot De Niro vibe. But anyway, yeah. So I
mean, I don't want to get too heavily into it, but I will tip my hat to the fact that a lot of people have complained, and I know Charlie wasn't overchuffed about it. I mean, Charlie is someone who felt that if you're going to have someone play someone overweight, cast someone overweight. Now, as someone who's been overweight most of my life, although not so much these days, but I certainly was. I mean, there were, in the early days of this show, I was like 80-something pounds heavier than I am now. I've never felt that way. I just think, like, whoever you think's best for the role, you got to make him up, fine. But there was certainly a bit of a backlash to Colin Farrell, a reasonably decent-looking guy, playing like a fat and ugly guy. But I think that the answer's in the end result. He's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I do like. Yeah, I have like kind of semi wrestled with that myself. I mean, I'm not that bothered because I like the interpretation, but
I think you and I, although we've got very different ideas in politics in a lot of ways, I think we're both wired the same way, that some things will really offend us and upset us. And for example, I don't ever want to do the Harry Potter films for all of that conversation. We've had that conversation on our podcast before. But with things like this, where it's almost mildly offensive at worst, it's like, whatever my opinion, I don't feel it that strongly to be bothered.
I can kind of see where Charlie was coming from, though, because I did see his tweet and post about it. I can kind of see where he's coming from, but that just comes like that. That's just like a villainous trope, though, isn't it? It's a long line. It's nothing new. And I mean, no offense, Charlie. Massive respect for him. Just the man is a legend, and we'll love him forever. But it's just one of those sort of, it's a new addition, a long line of villainous tropes, really. And it's not the first time, it's not the last time. But at the end of the day, his performance was brilliant. So
I just want to say, his problem is not that the Penguin's fat. His problem is that they've cast like a handsome, slim guy.
Well, no, exactly. That's typically what you would do. You sort of, as you said, pick who was the pick who's the best actor on the role, and you make them up. For example, a lot of, as I say, there's a lot of other roles have been cast this way. Like, also not a villainous role, but Anthony Hopkins in Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho, for example, he disappeared under a mound of latex to play Hitchcock.
Well, Anthony Hopkins does not look like Alfred Hitchcock, does he?
It's a poor example, but
no, it's a good example.
There are other ways around it, but it's just one of those things where like you can cast somebody. Oh, sorry. Anyway, I'm gonna be quiet for the rest of my voice is going. So anyway,
that's fine. The only thing I'll add is only sort of to make a point. You can take this whatever anyone wants to. Is like, even in Batman Returns, like Danny DeVito still had prosthetics put on for the Penguin.
Yes.
So you could take that for what it's worth, whether it's right or wrong, whatever.
But exactly, yeah. You still have to make my point. So I mean, it wasn't like it was like being at whatever size you are. That wasn't my point. It's just it's a villainous trope that you might have to wear makeup, be it scarring or glasses or whatever. That wasn't my point. I do apologise for that. I completely missed the point of my own point, so apologies for that one. Yeah, no, that wasn't my point at all, definitely. But yeah, it's just one of those things. You're gonna have to sort of wear makeup or like costume or whatever. But I just kind of feel like I'm
You've not made the wrong point.
So.
You've not made the wrong point. It isn't that. What I'm saying is Danny DeVito was playing a grotesque. This version of the Penguin's kind of an ordinary guy. He's just overweight and balding. I don't want to make too much of it. The point I'm making is I acknowledge the complaints. I understand the complaints. I'm not really feeling it. I don't care. But then, as the world goes these days, I'm in the most privileged demographic, so maybe I'm not designed to see it. But yeah, anyway, they are basically now led to the orphanage that was funded by Bruce's parents. And we find out that Martha is part of the Arkham family and had mental health issues, to say the least. There are continuities where she was in the Arkham family, but not generally. And the Riddler clearly has a grudge against the Wayne family, so Bruce Wayne might be the next target. And it turns out he sends like a letter bomb to Wayne. Let's say Wayne Manor, even though it isn't, probably more like Wayne Tower. And Alfred is hospitalised off that because he obviously opens the mail.
It's something about the way it's shot, because it's all done kind of like quite slow, and obviously it's broken apart by various cutting 2 and 4 scenes. It always comes across as like Alfred's a bit slow to the idea.
Well, it reminded me of Once Upon a Time in America. I'm like, answer the fucking phone. But obviously the phone ringing is an hour after that happened.
Yeah.
Because basically he was taken to a hospital an hour before, so maybe an hour and a half. What we find out is that Thomas was running for mayor, and his wife's history of, when we say mental health issues, that's underplaying it. She was incarcerated for them. And in the worry that that's going to derail his mayoral bid, he goes to Carmine Falcone and says, "Can you sort this out?" And it depends what version you believe.
Did they try and buy him off first?
No, it's a bit. Is it Rashomon, the different perspectives, in that he either tried to have him killed, or he went to talk to a very dangerous man who misinterpreted it and tried to have him killed. Either way. And this is in.
Can you take care of it? Yes,
I think this is in the Long Halloween as well. That there is some link between the Wayne family and Carmine Falcone, because injured, he's taken to the nearest doctor, not the hospital, and that happened to be Thomas Wayne. That is from the comic books. And when Alfred does come around from his movie coma, we find out that he says, and again, it's not proof, it's a perspective. Alfred said no, he just wanted to threaten the journalist, into silence. That journalist's name is, I can't remember the name now, but I think his son probably, that's a Batman Hush reference, which is another one of the great stories from this. Alfred has certainly inferred from this that it is Falcone that had Bruce's parents killed to prevent the reveal of the fact that Falcone killed the journalist. And again, there's no easy answers in this film because no one tells us whether that's true or not. But it's Alfred's perspective.
We hear it from Falcone. Falcone alludes to the idea.
Yeah, because before this, Bruce goes to see Falcone, and Falcone is kind of blaming other people.
He just says, like, he told me put the fear of God in him, and then he kind of says, and well, when that didn't work, but he didn't, so it wasn't quoting him at that point though. That's the thing. He says, so it's kind of cleverly done, or Falcone words it cleverly to disguise the fact that all he did was ask him to put the fear of God in him. Didn't say kill him.
Yeah.
He just elaborated after that. Yeah. And then
we learn that we learn around here that Selina believes Falcone to be her father. Her mother was at the lounge. It was quite interesting to look at the dates of birth because I think her mother was born in 1976. Well, Zoe Kravitz was born in 1988. Now, I don't think this character is born in 1988, but I don't think the age gap is profound. I think this was either an underage or very, very young adult. And she was obviously passed around this lounge, impregnated by Falcone. And then obviously her mother ends up, dead. And Falcone has no idea this is his daughter, with a grudge, because her mother died. I can't remember what year it was now. I think she died at 28. I think it was 2004. Which made me think, is Zoe Kravitz meant to be like 10 years older than her character? Was she like 6 or 7? I don't know. But whatever the case, is this where the Riddler gives himself up? Is this before? Oh, this is before. Falcone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's about bringing him into the light, wasn't it?
Mm.
So yeah.
So yeah.
Bruce gets in there, gets into his Batman outfit, and gets Falcone out of there, but he's sniped by the Riddler straight away from the window.
Yeah. So yeah, they're about to nail Falcone and which again now you might be able to answer because this is one thing I've seen it twice. So and I might have missed something.
Yeah.
So is the point? What's the point in the Riddler sniping Falcone at that point? Because he said, "Yeah, I couldn't do it without you," but it's like you could have sniped him at any time.
Logically, he could have, but there is a degree of theatre about it all.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done it. He's done one out the night after a debate. Well, I don't know. I mean, that is a fair point. I think there's a degree of he thinks him and Batman are working together. He could have sniped him any time, and that's a fair point.
But it depends. It has to be this way, kind of thing. It's like because of the whole cycle.
Well, part of me was wondering because they thought the Riddler, Penguin had done it to start with because he had his gun out. No, you're right. You're right to point that out, but I think he wanted Batman to get him out of there and kill him. Whether he's shutting himself away, I don't know. Because I mean, apart from the,
it's actually his apartment as well.
It is his apartment, yeah.
So
we don't know how much he goes outside, but obviously he went to the funeral earlier, so I don't really know. It's at this point he gives himself up. He turns out to be an accountant, Edward Nashton now. Nashton and Nigma have both been used in the comic books. I don't know if Nigma this is where my knowledge does fall down. I don't know if he sort of gave himself the name Nigma afterwards, or whether it depends what version you read. But yeah, he gives himself up, very sort of Jack Reacher style, sat in a diner. And then he's taken to Arkham Asylum, or Arkham State Hospital it is technically, but yeah, it's known that. Yeah, and he basically wants the Batman to come and see him. He honestly believes Batman is working with him. Batman believes that he knows he's Bruce Wayne, but he doesn't. And it turns out that something else is afoot and we don't know what it is. And I think the point I want to make is Bruce is not totally in control of himself at this point. He's banging on the glass and screaming, "What did you do?" He doesn't know. He goes back to the apartment. He works out that what he's been killing him with, everyone with, is like this carpet thing. And I do recognise that because I was brought up by like a carpet fitter. I recognise that tool. And he rips up a carpet, and it's basically a map of Arkham with all the sites where he's just basically going to bomb all the sort of dams and let all the water in.
And then as done that,
they're basically car bombs, and then it happens. So he's found out, but he's found out in time. In the meantime, this Bella Real has been elected mayor, and basically Gotham is now flooded. And I think the only couple of things I really want to say, and we can talk about all the detail you want, but there's only two things that really stand out from now on. Firstly, earlier in the film when he's beating people down and they say, "Who are you?" which we've had in a lot of Batman films, and the answer is normally, "I'm Batman." Here it's "I am vengeance." And it turns out the Riddler has been sort of on a very sort of dark website with about 500 followers of absolute fanatics who will sort of carry on his work once he's incarcerated. They're not mentally stable to start with, but he's brainwashed them a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So they dress up a bit like him and go out with various different guns and everything else to carry on his amazing work in their mind. And one of them says to Bruce, "I am vengeance." Or he doesn't say it to Bruce, he says it to Gordon when he's unmasked. He says, "I am vengeance." And Bruce looks at him as Batman and just looks at him. And that's where I'm getting that it mirrors the theme of escalation from the Nolan films, but not in the same way.
Yeah.
It is the idea that there's always been this theme in Batman, that Batman's existence, is it actually making anything better, or is it drawing out more crazies? And that is addressed in this film, but it's also the fact that I read it as this is where he learns he has to be more than just vengeance, and it's no it's no coincidence in my mind that it goes straight from there to him down in the floods within what is supposed to be Madison Square Garden, helping people. It's like, I can't just be this guy that comes out of the shadows, kicks the shit out of people and disappears. I have to be that beacon of hope as well. Otherwise, I'm these guys, you know? That's the way I've read it.
Yeah, it's probably the correct one, as you say, because this is well, this takes that sort of concept of escalation as Nolan, in terms of like just the whole atmosphere, the whole environment.
But Nolan's escalation was chaos.
This one's a bit more like direct, like, oh no, I am directly influencing people. It's like shit.
Nolan's escalation was chaos as well. This is not chaos in the same way. This is people who
taking the wrong lessons, or
they're you, but they've totally they've interpreted things very different from you.
I mean, you could argue whether like it was truly him anyway. They've just latched on to something they were going to do anyway. It's the same thing with any of these crazy. But anyway, So it kind of, we're basically at the point where it's wrapping up. We have the Riddler, who's like kind of mortified, everything's gone wrong the way it shouldn't have, but he's consoled by a cellmate who may or may not be the Joker.
Well, it's Barry Kagan from the Eternals, and it is the Joker.
Yeah.
Matt Reeves has said, because, I mean, that doesn't stack up well against if you take it as a tease for a sequel, it holds nothing compared to the Batman Begins turnover of the card. Take this guy, double homicide, I'll look into it. It's got nothing on that, but Reeves said that wasn't the point. The point was not to tease that he's definitely in a sequel, although he probably will be. You've contracted actor and conceived the character. But he said that it was more about that, like, the Riddler finds a friend, and actually the number of crazies is kind of, he didn't use the word crazies, I'm using the word crazies. The number of crazies is now multiplying. So it's not necessarily a tease for a Joker film. I kind of hope the next film isn't a Joker film, just because, yes, that is his Blofeld, that is his main antagonist, and you wouldn't want to go an entire incarnation of a Batman actor who does more than, let's say, 3 films without seeing the Joker. You might go 3, to be fair, but certainly if you're going to go to like 4, you've got to see the Joker. But I just think that, like, we did this with the Dark Knight. You know, I try something else. But if it is the Joker, kind of in Reeves we trust, I think he'll be okay. But where does it go from there? It is a bit Lord of the Rings with the several endings. You've got that ending of him looking up and covered in mud, very grimy, but comforting someone who's injured as they're about to be, strapped in, like possible spinal injury or something. And he's learning that he's got to be a bit more. And it's not the Nolan style epiphany where he's suddenly going to be fully formed, but it's like a step on the way, I think. He sees off Selina. Selina wants him to leave with her. She'll be back, of course, but no, he's wedded to Gotham.
He kind of like do that sort of thing where Batman says goodbye to Paul Walker, kind of. Yours.
Yeah, and that's it really. It's him riding on the bike. He's wedded to Gotham, and he has at least more idea of his future. His relationship with Alfred is warmer, and there are just hints that there are others out there that could give Batman trouble. That's it, really. That's the end of the film. I'll just quickly go with my final thoughts. I don't really want to say very much. I think that the main thing is the universe they've created, and I think my biggest difficulty in years to come will be if someone asks me to rank these, I don't know how to divorce world from film, because this is the Batman world I always wanted. So, like, you've finally given me my massive hit of methadone. Or even possibly heroin. You've given me exactly what I wanted. Some of it I didn't know I wanted. When I first saw the picture of his cowl, I thought that doesn't look quite right. In live action, it works and it's logical. That car, I thought, this looks like something out of Death Proof, but when it came out, it's like, that's logical and I like it. And then I'd see the odd panel and story beat, and I thought, that's The Long Halloween. That is my favourite Batman. I've referenced it an obscene amount through our Batman series. Part of that is I haven't read as much Batman as I should have, to be fair. I've probably read 24 stories in my life, but that's like my favourite. And that'll be the difficulty. How do I reconcile that to The Dark Knight, which was already a bit clean compared to Batman Begins, which had the Narrows and the rain and everything, where it's probably less comic book accurate. It's corrupt, but it's clean. But the Joker's performance, that take on Bruce Wayne, I just go, well, how do I compare it to that? Is that a better film? I really don't know. This is a better world. This is the Batman world I wanted. This might, when you meet a love who ruins you for anyone else, this might ruin me for any other version of Batman. Not ready to say this is the best film yet, but I genuinely, wholeheartedly loved it. And without wanting to cross-promote my stuff, I will. If you go to setthetape.com, you'll read my written review of it, where I'm not saying it's a great review or anything, but it is entirely representative of what I think. Like, within 1,500 words, I've distilled exactly what I think. I don't know where it ranks, but it's really good, and I didn't really have that much problem with the time either. But that's it from me.
Yeah, all of the above, really. I totally agree with you and Chris, definitely.
Yeah, so I'll say I won't repeat myself as I talk about the film's length, but I think if I have any sort of I'm kind of wrestling with the idea of, while I do like the aesthetic of this universe. Going forward, I kind of almost feel, and I'm not sure if it's fair, because I'm still wrestling with it in my head, whether the whole dark, gruff, serious sort of take on Batman is a bit played out at the moment. While I agree this is probably the better of the interpretation, but in terms of universe and world building, but I don't know. It's just one of the general feet. It might just be just a bit played out with comic book and superheroes and Batman in general. It just feels like a bit too much, possibly. That being said, I do wonder where we're going to go from here, because again, this is this part of DCU? Is this going to be alternate timeline? It all gets very confusing, but we'll see. I do think if we're going to do Joker, I think it might be a bit better if it was he's just a secondary character just in the film, just kind of as kind of how Penguin is in here. He's kind of he's there, but he isn't the main focus. You could easily do that. You could have that.
Oh, go full on and put him in. Have an Arkham Asylum film.
Yeah, or do something like that where you have you can have the whole Rose Gallery there, and you can be quite interesting then. But anyway, yeah. So whatever happens, I'll be here for it. But I guess we'll see. But
yeah, right. Anyway, this was kind of a last minute decision to record this, and I know, Becca, we did agree we weren't going to do any fun facts tonight, so let's go on straight onto social media and what we're doing next. So you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter,
and you can find me at Symmetronics, and you can find all the episodes on Podbean. I have to remind myself to say that, but you can find a link at symmetronics.co.uk, as always.
You can find us on Twitter and Facebook and across social media. Do expect us to talk. We are on Twitter, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Podbay, Stitcher, wherever you like to find us. But wherever you do listen to us, make sure you kindly give us a 5-star review and a rating. It helps us to rank higher and attract more listeners. I will try to tack some Bat facts onto next week's show. I do apologise, I was in a rush this evening and have no Bat facts for you, but I'll try to tack some on at the end of next week's show.
But more importantly, Becca, what's next?
Finally, the Expected Talk will return with a deep dive into the Bourne identity.